All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining me. My name's Sam Ellingwood. This is a Change Anything webinar, podcast, live event. I don't know what you want to call it, but what we're going to do tonight is talk a little bit about one of the tools that's helped me make the most change in my life and give you guys a little background into my story of why this is important to me and what my goals are for having this event. And then we're going to really just dive into it, talk about things that have worked, things that haven't, lessons learned, things like that. So appreciate you guys joining me tonight. And let me know if you have any comments, put them in there. We'll get to them at the end. Go over as many questions as people have. So, the reason I held this tonight was that, we're getting ready to come to New Year's Eve. And, everybody uses that. I've used that before as a reason to really evaluate and look at what kind of change we want to make in our life. Most of us aren't where we want to be. I think most people want to grow, want to continue making changes, improvements, and becoming a better version of themselves. And I know that I've had numbers of New Year's Eve where I was ready and just gung ho, willing to make some new changes, tried and failed. And I'm not the only one that does that. There's actually science now. I was just reading about it today. Ryan Hanley posted an article where he talked about the fresh start effect, where we look for time markers on the year. So Mondays, starts a new month, starts a quarters. New Year's Eve is a huge one. We all examine it. We come up with new goals, and we're doing it. Problem is, most of us give those goals up just about as fast as we start them. So what we're going to talk about tonight, the NAC method, is a proven technique. It's something I've used, but thousands of people have used it to make changes. And I think if you set some smarter goals that are aligned with your vision and your strengths, and you use this model, you'll be successful. And this year will be different. So, and it's not just me that talks about how hard it is to change. I saw this in the newspaper yesterday. It's a Juul advertisement, and it's talking about smoking, quit, start smoking again, quit, start smoking again. So down here, the average smoker tries to quit 30 times, and it talks about make the switch to Juul. Well, I don't know about making the switch to Juul, but I believe that you start and try to quit something 30 times before you're successful. And trying again can be scary when you failed, and you already have that pain associated with that failure. I've had my own share of successes, but I've also had plenty of times where I've tried to quit something, tried to change something, and failed, and come back and learned. And it's been like this for a while. So throughout my life, I've been dealing with a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and I've never really had good control of that. As early as kindergarten or first grade, I think it was, I was having panic attacks before school. I was so nervous about going to see my teacher, Mrs. Ice, that I was throwing up before school started. So I've been dealing with this for a long time. And I was doing a fairly good job of it, I think, until high school. And I really just let it get out of control and started eating too much, started abusing alcohol and drugs. My God-given talents have, kind of taken me through to this point, kept me successful. And by the grace of God, I haven't ended up in jail or killed anybody. But, in my late 20s, after I met my wife and joined the Catholic Church, I started to make some changes, and I had some success. I lost 100 pounds, and I was running marathons, and I was getting in really good shape. But while I had some success in those areas, I was out of control in a lot of others, and I caused a lot of people a lot of pain through very selfish and self-destructive acts that I did, and I never dealt with the emotions and the guilt and things that kind of came up because of the pain that I caused others, and just went into this downward spiral. And it was really from about 30 years old up until this last winter where I was just steadily declining. I was having a lot of professional success. I was getting promotions, and my reviews were great. And I was getting on great projects and working for better companies and doing all the things success, outward appearances would make people think I'm being fairly successful. I got a nice house, 3 healthy kids, a wife, and it's all good, but I was miserable. I hated my job. I wasn't the, husband and father I knew I should be. I was angry all the time. I was, tired. And it really, just culminated last winter. I ballooned up to 315, 17 pounds. I was on cholesterol medicine. I was on antidepressants, anti-anxiety medicines, blood pressure medicine. They were worried about my A1C. So from a healthy standpoint, I was killing myself. So mentally, physically, and emotionally, I was just dying slowly. I wasn't, never had this, spectacular rock bottom. I just kind of kept going. I was having a lot of problems seeing any way out of it. I knew I had to make some changes, and I started doing little changes. And I would change a few things, but I would just switch. So I'd stop chewing tobacco and I'd switch to cigars. And I'd smoke just as many cigars as I probably was chewing. So I wasn't really making healthy changes. I was just shifting my addictive behavior, my self-destructive behavior to something else. While I had a little bit of success, I still wasn't happy, and I knew that. And then in last year, just a week, I was actually selected to be in the Michael Hyatt book launch for Your Best Year Ever. I actually got the book here, and it's a great book. And it was, I read it, and I worked through all the exercises, and I was super stoked about trying this and making some changes and really, just having my best year ever. And that lasted all of a week. And, after about a week, I got pneumonia, and it started off as a really bad cough, and it just never went away. And it was 6 weeks actually before it completely went away. And about 4 weeks in, coughing so hard that I broke a rib. My back was hurting me. I was sick for 6 weeks, and I was just done. I was tired. I didn't know how to make a change, but I knew I needed to desperately, because the only end game was that it was eventually going to kill me. And I didn't want to set that example for my children. I didn't want them, when I died at 50 years old, to say, man, what a loser. He was a drunk. He was fat. He didn't, do this or that. And, what was happening was I was allowing the mistakes that I had made and the decisions I'd made to really define who I was. And I wasn't changing. I was too scared to try again to change. The pain that I associated with change was so intense in my head that I was afraid to try it. So watching a Netflix movie, I was flipping through Netflix, and I saw I'm Not Your Guru. And I had heard about it on a podcast. I'd been searching for some answers and some tools on how to make some changes. I was like, all right, I'll watch this. So I started watching this, and for those who haven't seen it, if it's still on Netflix, I strongly recommend you watch I'm Not Your Guru. It documents Tony Robbins, kind of what he does on an average day during one of his events, and kind of how these events work. Listening to the stories and listening to the people, and it's like, man, this stuff could work for me. Problem was, I think I was half drunk that night and wasn't really paying attention, but it did have an impact on me. And I remembered, hey, I bought a Tony Robbins book a while back. It was on my Kindle, and I started reading it again. And it was Awaken the Giant Within. And it talked about making decisions to change. And then it gave you a framework to change. This is how I can make some changes. This is how I can get control of my life. This is how I can turn the tide. But the problem was, I just kept putting it off. I was like, I'll start later. I'll start next Monday. I'll wait till after spring break. I'll wait till after X. And it just kept going. I started making plans, and I went back to the method I saw in Tony Robbins' book and just walked through it step by step. So often in life, I'll see the tools and I'll think, that sounds too simple, or it couldn't work that easy or whatever. And I don't want to bullshit anybody. None of this is easy, but it works if you're willing to follow it. If you're willing to put in the work and the effort that it takes to do it, any of these techniques. And the technique I want to talk about today, the NAC method, isn't the only tool out there. There are lots of tools to make changes in your life. Find the one that works for you. This is one that's worked for me. It's worked for a lot of people. So how's it worked for me? Since May 21st of last year, I've lost over 70 pounds. My cholesterol is back in the normal range. I'm not on that medicine anymore. I'm not on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medicine anymore. My A1C is healthy. My blood pressure is healthy. and I feel great. I still got a long way to go. I don't want anybody to think that I'm Mother Teresa here, or I'm all better. But now I have a vision. I've got goals. I've got a 5-year plan. I've got all these things going. I've built some momentum from this change, and that's what I want to do today: is help people to make a change anything, build that momentum, get some wins, so that you can keep changing, keep growing, and grow into the person that you were intended to be. And that's my vision, is to encourage and support growth. But what I'm going to do today is talk to you in depth about the NAC method. So what's neuroassociative conditioning? Well, this is something that was created by Tony Robbins, and it really is kind of built on the foundation of neuro-linguistic conditioning, which essentially means that what you're trying to do is you're associating behaviors with pain and pleasure. So all behavior is driven by the desire to avoid pain and to seek pleasure. When we experience emotions like frustration, boredom, depression, whatever, we take action to alleviate the pain associated with that. So if you're bored and you've had a drink before and that relieved your boredom, or you were anxious about a networking event, you didn't want to talk to people, but you took a drink and it kind of liquored you up, or lubed you up a little bit and got your juices flowing. The next time you're in that situation, your brain will remember, hey, last time I had that pain of anxiety at one of these, I was able to take a drink, and that was able to help alleviate the pain, avoid that pain. And your body builds these neuro pathways to avoid that pain and to get the pleasure. And these become habits and rituals in our lives. And we have to, if we want to make changes, we have to break those pathways. We have to disrupt those habit cycles. So you change anything, little things. I think so many times in my life, I tried to go right for the biggest problem, or I tried to change everything all at once, and it just doesn't work that way. Maybe some people can do it, but it's been my experience that you can't change everything all at once. You need to make incremental changes and keep building on that, keep the momentum going, keep the confidence going. That's when you can change something big. So it's change anything, then change something. That, for me, was alcohol. I've still got other things that I need to work on, but that was the biggest one. And I knew that it would have the most bang for the buck. So I went for that change, and that's changed something significant. So you change anything to get the momentum going, change something significant, and that just propels you forward. And then once you've kind of gotten that, you can change everything. And what do I mean by that? When you get your life focused and aligned to your vision, you're setting audacious goals, you're living an outcomes-driven life, and you've had some success, you start measuring everything by whether it's getting you closer to your goals or not, closer to your vision or not. And that's when you can change everything. And it just keeps feeding on itself, and you get this momentum, and the more momentum you get, the faster you go, the more momentum, and it's compounding. And so that's my theory, and that's why I want to help people take that first step of just changing anything, because it's so crucial that you get out of your own head and do it. You've got to decide what you really want and what's preventing you from having it. That's the first step. Then you've got to get leverage by associating massive pain to not changing and massive pleasure to experience of the change now. Then you have to interrupt the pattern. You've got to interrupt that pattern. You've got to give yourself enough time and enough ways to interrupt it that you can break free. Now, after you interrupt that change, you have to create empowering alternatives that allow you to substitute healthy behaviors to give you the same feelings. Because if you don't do that, you're just going to change. It's like when I stopped chewing tobacco and started smoking cigars. That's a situation where I didn't create an empowering alternative to replace. Finally, the fifth and sixth steps are to help make sure that the change is long-term. So you have to condition the behaviors over and over again. And this is, again, you have to give yourself enough time to interrupting it and creating an empowering alternative that you can condition the new pathway, the new habit. So that's important. And then you have to test it. Is it really aligned with your values and vision? Or is it something that's not working for you? If it's not working, don't do it. And that is my best advice right there. Is if whatever method, whatever tool, or whatever theory isn't helping you, scrap it. If you've given it enough chance, really worked on it, really tried, and it does not work, then go into something else. There's no right answer to this. It's just what works. So the first step, you've got to decide, what is it that I really want? And this was something that I didn't take a lot of time to worry about when I was first getting started. I didn't think about what I really wanted. I didn't care. I was in this just pit of misery, and I wasn't changing, and I knew I needed to, but I didn't know what I really wanted. So you need to sit down and start thinking about it. What do you want your life to look like? One of the best tools that I've seen for this, it's something that Kurt's told me about, it's something that I've seen from Michael Hyatt and others, is think about what you want people to say at your funeral. When you die, you're going to have a funeral probably, and people are going to get together. What are they going to say about you? What are they going to say in your obituary? What kind of legacy do you want to live? How do you want to be remembered? Because you can back into what you're doing now to see, if I keep doing what I'm doing now, how am I going to be remembered? And if it doesn't line up with what your vision, what your goal is, what you really want is, then you need to make some changes. So what do you really want? And you can break that down. I really, right now, my goal last year was to really improve my health. So what did I want? What did I really want? Well, I wanted to lose some weight. And, it wasn't just a little bit of weight. I wanted to lose a lot of weight. I wanted to get back in shape. I wanted to be known as someone that was healthy, that was active, that I wanted to have been able to been alive to play with my children. There was a lot of things that I wanted that the way I was living, it just wasn't lining up. And that's where the second part of this is what's keeping you from it? What actions, what things that you're doing right now are keeping you from achieving that goal? You need to have a really clear target here of what you want, and then take an inventory of the things that are keeping you from that. Like I said, you don't want to necessarily start trying to change everything all at once. But if you have that list of things that are keeping you from it, you can start knocking some of them off, some of the little things. You can start exercising more. You can start watching what you're eating. You can set smarter goals. You can do these things in this framework, but you have to do this step first. You have to decide what it is that you're moving towards. You want this compelling future that you're working towards. It's going to pull you towards it. You don't want all this to be negative. I want to stop drinking. I want to stop smoking. I want to do this. That's not what you want. You want to create a compelling future that pulls you towards it. So some of the things that I've learned from doing this first step a few times is be true to you. And what do I mean by that? Well, you need to make sure that the things that you're saying you want are really things that you want. You don't want, this isn't the time to worry about impressing people. Too often I think I'm more concerned about what others think about me, or hear, how my goals will be perceived, or how my ideas will be perceived by others. But this is the chance to create your vision for your future, and to do all the things you need to do to have the life you want, to design your life. So be true to you. Don't try to build a life that you think will please somebody else, because in the end, you won't be successful in that. The second big thing is mindset. I never understood the importance of mindset in making real change, real lasting, radical change. You need to focus on gratitude. You need to look at abundance versus scarcity thinking. All these things that are kind of this hippy dippy stuff have a lot of impact on what you can do. You have to believe that this change is possible. If you don't believe that, if you've I'm just an alcoholic, that's all I'm ever going to be, I'm never going to change, or everybody in my family's fat, there's no way I can change. No, you've got to believe it. It is a mindset that you need to adopt, that you can grow, that you can change, that you are able to control a lot more than you think. You need to focus on the things you can control, and and not worry so much about the things you can't control. And then finally, is commitment. It's usually not a matter of knowing how to change, because most of us know what we need to do to get the change we want. It's the motivation, it's the commitment to making that change that it has the most importance and the most impact on whether you're going to be successful or not. So that actually leads right into the second step, which is leveraging pain and pleasure. And the way you do that is by leveraging massive pain to not changing, and massive pleasure to changing now. So how did I do that? So for the pain-inducing questions, I asked myself, if I don't change now, what will happen? And I really got graphic about it. I went through what I thought would happen if I didn't make any changes to my drinking. I'd get cirrhosis. By the time I'm 55, 56 years old, I'm going to have liver problems if I last that long. Horrible pain associated with all those liver problems and all the weight gain that I'm having. I thought about how bad it hurt when I had pneumonia. Just used everything I could. The pain of my daughters crying at my funeral before they'd had a chance for me to walk them down the aisle. So you need to do everything you can to push yourself to the breaking point, by leveraging pain. Your brain doesn't know whether this pain is real or not. A lot of people have to have these rock bottom moments before they can make real change. And that's because those incidents, so if you have a drunk driving accident and you kill a bunch of people, the pain associated with that accomplishes all these things we're doing here through the thought experiments. Well, I would much rather do this creating the pain in my head than to actually go through it because of something. And thank God that I've been spared doing that. But this is how you do that. It is just use every tool you can, every smell, everything you can to make this as real as possible of what the pain will be if you don't change now. On the flip side of that, and it's important to do both. You don't want to just have the pain. You also need to experience the pleasure of changing now. And what do I mean by that? Well, think about smiling and looking or walking your daughter down the aisle, or think of being there for grandchildren, or being old enough to take care of your spouse when they get sick. Whatever it is that helps you see the pleasure or feel the pride. What it'll be like when you lost 100 pounds and you walk into a room and everybody turns around and like, damn, look at that guy. Whatever it is that motivates you, you need to know your motivators, your strengths to understand this, but create the pleasure in your head of what happens if I change now? What will my life be like if I change now instead of waiting? Because that's what this stuff is all about, is to get you motivated to do it. Once you've kind of created this mental leverage by associating massive pain with not changing and massive pleasure with changing, you have to take the opportunity to interrupt the behavior that you're engaging in that's causing the results you want to avoid. So you need to interrupt the limiting pattern, the beliefs, the habits, and you have to do something that you didn't expect. And this is something, again, if you're watching that I'm Not Your Guru video that Tony Robbins talks about, and he does some of the craziest shit you can imagine to help break people's patterns and interrupt their behaviors. And the crazier you get, I think the better. And you need to work on accountability and some other things here, but it needs to be a disruptive way to break your pattern. You have to break that circuit that you've created with continually doing the problem behavior to relieve the pain. So once you can find a way to disrupt that, and you start scrambling the memories of your past and breaking up those pathways, it's easier. It is really hard when you first try to change. and it gets easier over time. I don't know if it ever goes away. If you're making big drastic changes, especially with dealing with addictive behaviors and addictive substances, I still want to drink. There are other things that I'd love to do that I just know I can't. But you can make those connections weaker. You can make those pathways not as strong, but you have to interrupt the behavior. Most people want a new result, but they continue to act in the same way. And you just can't do that. You have to take action to interrupt the pattern. And, the more creative and weird you can get, the more likely I think that it is that it's going to work. And you have to interrupt the pattern in the moment. It's easy to think you're going to stop drinking when you're drunk, or it's easy to think I need to stop using when you're high, but you have to interrupt that pattern in the moment before you take it. So some of the things that the lessons I've learned for step 3 is the importance of micro decisions. Yeah, you have to make that decision to stop. And we talked about step 1 is making a decision, but the micro decisions are important. Every day, maybe multiple times a day, there will be many opportunities for you to make micro decisions. Do you continue the pattern or you disrupt it? You have to make that decision, and you have to keep making that decision over and over again, whether or not you're going to continue the pattern or disrupt it. The second part is to plan ahead. You have to know exactly what you're going to do when the pattern begins. So when I stopped chewing tobacco, I knew I'm not going to go into the gas station. I planned ahead. I knew if I went into a gas station, I was going to buy another can of chewing tobacco. So I just stopped going in. There was no reason for me to go in there again. So I knew that was my plan ahead. Same with creating bright lines. If you give yourself wiggle room, you're going to use it. Ambiguity creates hesitation and makes it harder to follow through. So I found that creating bright lines, especially in the beginning, makes it a lot easier. And one of the ways I did that was, I joke about this, I'm a lawyer, so I made a contract. And I wrote this contract and gave it to my wife, so it did a few things. It created bright lines. It said, I will not drink until I'm under 250 pounds. I knew I was at 317 pounds right then, and I kept that bright line. I wasn't going to say, I'll only have a drink, I'll only have 2, because I've tried that before, and I knew that wouldn't work. So I created a bright line. No drinks until under 250 pounds. I was very specific about my target goal. I used smarter goals. I kept the number there on purpose so that I would remember that. And I made consequences for breaching. If I breached it, I wasn't going to have sex for 2 weeks, I think it was. And, if there's anything I like more than alcohol, that's it. So I made a penalty, and then I gave it to my wife. I needed an accountability partner because I knew if I was left to myself, I wouldn't be able to do this alone. So it gave me bright lines. It was very clear, and I knew the penalty for doing it. And it gave me enough time to disrupt those pathways. If it was something that I could achieve in a couple of days or a couple of weeks, I don't know if that would have been enough for me. So I made it so that it would be something that I kept doing for a long period of time. It ended up being about 6 months before I hit the goal. But that worked for me, and I think a strategy like that can work for you. I've had a lot of success with cold turkey. It's not fun. But I'm kind of an all or nothing person. It's way easier for me to cut something out than to moderate. And that's my own weakness, but I know that about myself at this point. So you have to know yourself. This goes back to knowing yourself, being true to yourself. When you figure out what tools work, you can start leveraging your own strengths. Step 4 is important, and I've already talked about this a little bit. You need to create new empowering alternatives. You have to create new patterns, new beliefs, and new habits, because you need to replace the old pleasures that you were getting. When you start most of these bad habits, they're not, just pain causing. They give you pleasure. So you need to create new things. And you can replace this with what I've seen is massive action towards new goals, new businesses, new relationships, something positive. And, if you can't figure out what to do, look at other people that have changed what you're trying to do and model your behavior after those people who've made these changes and see, what worked for them. So I started really focusing on working out, on changing my eating habits and other behaviors so that I could really work on creating positive benefits that come with exercise that would give me a similar pleasure, in some of the stress release that I used, or stress relief that I used alcohol for. So, I knew that I could use exercise to at least fulfill some of that. But I also started working a lot more on, hey, what are some other goals? And now I've got the Dunk by 40 project. So I didn't want to stop. And I kept it going. And I knew that was another thing. That was another massive goal that I could focus on, and keep, empowering alternatives, keep focusing my massive action on other tasks. So, this is a huge step. And I think if you don't watch out, you're going to just replace one bad behavior with another, or you're just going to fall right back into it. So you need to build routines and rituals that support your new behavior. So streaks are important for me, because I have really high competition strengths. Use those strengths to come up with routines and rituals that support the new behavior. Do as much as you can to design your life in such a way that it's going to propel you towards these goals, instead of making this all about willpower, because willpower will fail you. But if you create routines and habits and other processes in your life that move you towards a goal and kind of automate some of your decisions for you, you're going to be way ahead of the curve. So it's important to do that. And this will help you to condition the new behavior. You have to reward yourself and punish yourself in the moment. So I talked about it's important to interrupt the behavior in the moment, but you also need to reward yourself when you're successful in changing this. And this is something that I've not done a good job at, is to reward myself. I'm really quick to have some negative self-talk and to punish myself. But you also have to be quick to reward yourself when you are successful. Give yourself a pat on the back. Create little steps along the way that when you hit this goal, you're going to reward yourself with X, and give yourself some milestones to help. This is a must if you want to have long-term change, because if you don't condition the behavior, if it's just a one-time thing, you're going to revert back, and you don't want to do that. And there's something that Tony Robbins talks about in his book, is you want to continue conditioning this behavior until the new pathway becomes a highway. Some of the things, if you've smoked for 40 years, picking up a cigarette after you eat is going to be a major pathway. You have to disrupt that and create a new one. That new pathway takes time. Doing it once doesn't make it a very strong path. Doing it multiple times makes the path stronger. Doing it consistently over long periods of time will create that new highway and weaken the old association, and you'll be there. You won't have to struggle so hard every day, because every day you go from your old association to your new association, it just becomes weaker and weaker, and your new pathway becomes stronger and stronger. So it just becomes easier. And finally, the sixth step is to test it. You want to make certain that the pain is fully associated with the old pattern. So, I still to this day want to drink. It's not like I don't want that. I enjoy that, but I know now that I still remember that pain. I have to remind myself of that pain, and it's important to continue to remind yourself of that. And that's part of the reason why, even now that I'm doing the Dunk by 40, again, I'm not drinking until after I dunk or my 40th birthday, because I want to give myself more time to create that pathway, but also to keep that association of the pain that I imagined before I started this, and I continue to imagine, of not changing. You need to make sure your pleasure is associated with a new pattern. So if you aren't getting the benefits from this new pattern, it won't work. It won't replace the problem pattern. So you need to make sure that you're getting the same benefits or similar benefits from whatever your new empowering alternatives are. That's key. You need to make sure it's aligned with your values, beliefs, and rules, and make sure that certain benefits of the old pattern have been maintained. This is what I was just talking about, that you need to make sure that that's something that you are still doing, is getting the benefits of the old pattern. So I don't have any more. This is something that you just have to work on. I don't see any questions in the chat. I know that I've had some people come up to me and ask me how I've done it, and honestly, it's understanding the pain and pleasure, and that we're all seeking pain and are all seeking pleasure and trying to avoid pain, and that's kind of how we act. It's how our decisions are made. If you can understand that, if you can be willing to be uncomfortable, if you're willing to put in the work, you can make these changes. And I hope that this New Year's or next Monday or whenever you decide to make that change, that you're successful. If you need any help with any of these things, have any questions about the NAC method, or just want to talk, please reach out to me. That's why I'm doing this. I want to help as many people grow as possible. And, I think this is a great tool. There are plenty of other awesome tools out there. I'm going to do my best to share those on my blog and in my posts. But in the meantime, keep growing,